Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Day. So, if you want to, go ahead and wear a Hawaiian shirt and jeans. Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm also going to need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday, too.
Welcome to the Managing Humans podcast. I'm your host, Chad Bates. On today's episode, Kimika Green is our guest. She's an extraordinary leader I've had the privilege of getting to know. She's also the director of Seattle Children's Alyssa Burnett Adult Life Center here in Bothell, Washington. Kimika grew up in Jamaica and spent a number of years in the greater D.C. area before moving to Seattle to take on her new role with Seattle Children's. She has a master's degree in science administration from Central Michigan University, and her wisdom and ability to truly listen and her knack for asking the right questions have left a lasting impression on me. We'll also explore the concept of rounds, a practice borrowed from healthcare, and how it's transformative to how managers stay connected with their teams, especially in a world of remote work. Her experience and insight from the hospital industry will really add to any manager's toolkit. A slight warning for this week, the sound was a little scratchy at points. I tried to clean it up as much as possible, but I couldn't make it quite perfect. As always, if you like the show, give it a like, subscribe, or comment on your podcast app of choice, YouTube, or on our Substack. We're also on LinkedIn, where you'll find links to all the profiles of our guests and other posts about topics that come up on the show. Now let's welcome Kimika to the show. Kimika Green, welcome to the Managing Humans podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me.
So, as my wife's boss's boss and my friend, I'm very excited to have you on the show because every time I talk to you, and especially when it's actually about work stuff, I find out something new about your work past or where you've come from, and it's delightful and interesting, and that is the heart of podcasting. So we've got to get you on. And
I appreciate it. I'm happy to talk about the delightful and interesting past of mine.
And I think, so many different things I want to ask you about, so we'll get started. But I want to start off first with where you came from, as in what was your first job, and a little about where you grew up, because I have a feeling that we had a string of a lot of very similar first jobs for folks, but yours might be a little different than delivering newspapers.
Yes, well, in terms of where I grew up, I was born and spent the first 12 years of my life in my home country of Jamaica. I'm a very proud Jamaican. From there, I moved to Florida, South Florida, which is where I went to high school and college, and where I got my first job in the official workforce after I graduated from college. And from there, being in South Florida, I did not see many opportunities for someone like myself, a college grad that was still hungry for more experience. The hospital that I was at was a reputable one, a wonderful one, but not one that had many opportunities for someone like me that majored in health administration, which was a new coursework at the time. So during my sophomore year of college, that was 2006? My advisor, I was studying nursing. My advisor said, why are you doing nursing? And I'm like, well, I figured this is the only way I can get into administration. And at the time, I was suffering with this microbiology class. And I was like, I hate this class. I hate the instructor. I hate everything about it. I don't want to do this class. So anyway, after talking with my advisor, she's like, well, there's an entire major called health administration, and it fits exactly what you're looking for. And I was like, I had no idea. So I switched majors, and I was in heaven ever since.
Yeah.
So in terms of the career path that I wanted to follow, it was hard for me to find opportunities in South Florida because, of course, a lot of people come to South Florida to, retire, and they stay in the same position for 30-something years. So positions never open up. And
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to meet some good people that recommended that I go with them on a trip to Maryland. And I said, why not? I went with them and I loved the area. I love DC. Went to Virginia, and as the DMV, as they call it,
Mm-hmm.
it was it was a great history to learn about, especially in DC, and learning that healthcare was booming. And I had the opportunity to apply for a position at a hospital in DC, and I was lucky enough to get it, and I moved. I
Mm-hmm.
moved to DC, and that was where the trajectory of my career just took off. So being that the first 6 years of my career, I kind of spent in frontline roles. So I was a front desk person, which they called an outpatient assistant. I was a coordinator, then promoted to that, but still doing front desk duties. And then I was hungry for a leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
So this was around, I'm trying to follow my own timeline. So this was around 2014, 2015, where I said to myself, like, I need growth. And I did apply for positions at that particular hospital. And that was my first lesson into the politics of how recruitment happens, and whether it should or should not go that way is debatable. But,
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot of who you know and not what you know. And once I realized that, I started to look externally, and that's how I got into the world of community health. So in 2015, I got a great position as a clinical operations analyst. And for a federally qualified health center that was at the time only had 2 locations, it was a great opportunity to learn about how a space like that functions so differently than an outpatient hospital setting or an inpatient hospital setting, which is what I was used to.
Mm-hmm.
I fell in love, of course, because our goal is, and I still say ours if I'm still in community health. I still can't let it go because I loved it that much. But anyway, the goal, with community healthcare centers, of course, is to serve families, serve patients, adults, children that don't have the same access that maybe you and I have, right? Access to
Mm-hmm.
health insurance, have adequate, frequent income, right? Sufficient income, or even their legal status. So after that first year as an operations analyst, my first job in leadership was a clinical operations manager. I was
Mm-hmm.
promoted about a year after joining that center. Um, and that's where the leadership aspect of my career took off.
Okay. So are all of the positions you've had since you came to the U.S. been in healthcare?
Yeah.
In one form or the other? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. The one caveat I can say is in college,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in college, I was 17 when that went. Because coming from Jamaica, we're always younger, right? We start school younger, so we come to America, we're always a year younger. And so as soon as I stepped foot, I went to Florida Atlantic University in Boca
Mm-hmm.
Raton, Florida, and my first job was in a library. I was a library assistant, so that was the first
Okay.
official job. But that was like a college campus.
Yeah.
You do your 10, 12 hours a week. Then I was like, I need more hours. And that's when I moved into that work study program where I joined the admissions office. So I was the person that would call all the high schoolers and say, hey, we're still missing your transcripts. Hey, you
Mm-hmm.
need to finish your application. Then I hated that because I was just on the phone all day. I didn't get to see anybody except my coworkers, which, in college, that's not really a thing to focus on.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
then sophomore year, I got a position with an accounting office. It was a small business. And he was a certified general accountant originally from Israel. Then he lived in Canada, then to the States. And that was, when I say I learned so many lessons from that man, um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things on a personal level, because, he was Jewish and is Jewish and very proud Jewish man. And I learned a lot about their customs and beliefs and the things that he felt that being marginalized, the areas in which we were marginalized and what we share. Because he would also say, well, you're a black woman, and I'm a Jewish man and we're going through things together. And I was like, all right, no problem. And, so it was interesting learning about that, his own experiences. So I did work for an accountant for 2 years. I finished out college working with him, and it was amazing. But in terms of, yes, when I finished college and started my career, it's always been healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you had a calling to helping the health of others.
Absolutely. In high school, I was a part of what they call HOSA, Health Occupation Students of America. So, my last 2 years of high school, I was a part of that program. So I was one of those students that had to come to school in their scrubs because halfway through the day, we had to go to our site to do our internship. And then that way you got extra college credits. So it was a cool program. So really, my first introduction to the healthcare environment was in high school through that program.
Okay. That's awesome. I did DECA and FBLA in high school, which were business and
DECA
marketing.
too.
Oh, nice. Funny story. My brother-in-law and I were at the same National DECA conference in Anaheim, California in 1992. And
Really?
that was, which was also when the South Central riots happened after the Rodney King verdict. And you could see the smoke billows from Anaheim in the hotel we were in.
Gosh.
So it was.
What was that vibe at the time, just in general? I can just imagine it was a very heavy.
A lot of dumb high school kids not knowing what was happening or even paying attention, and all the teachers trying to freak out or starting to freak out and be like, "Oh, we should probably go to the airport and get out of here."
Of course.
It was
avoidance.
Yeah. Years later, I went back and lived in Anaheim when I helped a company that I worked for open a store down there. And then I realized how far away, like, South Central Los Angeles is from Anaheim. And I'm like, why was anybody worried?
How far is ridiculous. It, though? I don't even know. How far is
with traffic, it can be like 45 minutes to an hour or more.
Yeah.
So
then, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely distancing.
Yeah. It's not close. So there was no need to worry. But years later, after when he started dating my sister, and they came down to Anaheim when I was living there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the last time I was here was for the DECA conference in '92," and I was like, "I was at that conference too." We figured out that we went to two different high schools, but they were near each other, and we actually flew down on the same plane, stayed in the same hotel. It was
no idea
it's
that
interesting.
Years later, the family.
Yeah. I always wonder how many times you're walking by somebody that you don't know yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think about that. Especially now that I've just moved to this area. I'm like, wonder what the future holds, right? In terms of who I'll see again.
Yeah. It's always surprising.
Yeah.
So back to management. So you got your first role in the hospital managing folks. Did you feel ready for that job of taking on management of people? Was that something that you had learned through school? Had you been kind of progressively leveled up to managing people in other jobs, or was it kind of like you got the job, you better know how to take care of yourself when you and your people when you get out there?
So, I mean, yes, I learned about all the different managerial concepts in school and leadership styles, and are you this style, or are you authoritative, are you this, are you that, and you always, as I would say, I don't know what I am yet. I have to see, how it goes. But was I ready? Absolutely. I was absolutely ready for management. I was so hungry from my South Florida days to get into a management position. I was one of those young people coming out of college thinking, well, I have a bachelor's degree in health administration, then of course I'm going to get a manager job coming out of college, right? Because I have this degree and I'm qualified, so let's go. And I was humbled in the sense that, you have to work your way up, even with the education. So while I was working my way up, I took notes from what I was experiencing, but also my coworkers, and seeing how my manager, behaved and treated us. And, if they had different managers, how did they treat them? And then I particularly paid attention to the executive level people, right? All of the chief level people. I watched how they interacted with staff. Did they know everyone's name? Did they know what everybody did? Did they say hello to them in the hallway? Those simple things I knew that teams appreciated. And even at that hospital I worked at in South Florida, there was a chief administrative officer that used to come by every week. She used to do rounds through our unit, and she would always say good morning. She would always stop and talk to all of the staff. And even me, I was a unit coordinator at the time, and she would ask me, how are things going? Didn't you just start recently? And she did it so consistently and with such a smile and such a pleasant presence. And it never appeared as if I'm just doing this just to check a box. I don't even know if she had to do it, because none of the others came, but she did. And I remember saying to myself, well, that's something I want to do. When I, get to a level of management, I want to always have a pulse on what's going on with my team, and not be one of those managers that manages behind the desk, So yes, I felt really ready. And, I was always taking notes. I was always learning. So when I got a manager position, finally, I wasn't given any official training, no. But at the time, honestly, I felt like I didn't need it because of all the experiences, right, that I had, that my coworkers had, and working in the healthcare setting. It wasn't just the administrative part of it, but learning the clinical side of it. How are the medical assistants feeling? How are the nurses feeling? How are the providers feeling? Understanding the nuances with how nurse practitioners are regarded and treated versus a physician, and the intricacies there. There were so many things to learn that I did learn along the way, that by the time I got to management, I felt equipped and ready. Once again, you can say that, and when you get into it, you're like, what the hell? But yes, at the time I did feel ready. I can't say that I felt lost or overwhelmed or was looking for the perfect manual. I felt as if it was overdue, and that it was something that I wanted sooner, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you can tell what kind of person I was when I was younger.
Yeah. And I think you made two really important points there that are really helpful for folks who want to be managers or who are new managers, which is the simplest things to do is talk to all of your employees. And we've had multiple guests bring that up. It's like if you don't talk to your employees unless they're in trouble, every time you talk to them, they think they're in trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If you say hi and just have like a cordial relationship with them, they're more apt to tell you things and be open with you about stuff and not think that they're in trouble all the time. And then the other one that I think is also even more helpful if you're not a manager yet, which is pay attention to what good managers are doing.
Yeah. and also what the bad ones are doing too.
Yep.
Right?
Oh.
So you know what not to do.
You have read ahead on the questions, so we'll get to that. We'll get that to a second. We'll get that.
Oh, okay. I didn't read. Sorry, let me stay on track. No, I did not.
That's okay. That's okay.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's watching what other managers do, even after you become a manager. I mean, that's why the things that I've learned from having these conversations with people is invaluable.
Yeah.
Because there's always something new you can learn, or a thing that you haven't thought about, or something you need to be reminded of. And it's, just keeping your eyes open and mouth shut can really help.
That's been one of the keys to my success as a leader is keeping my mouth shut and listening. Because a lot of the information, a lot of my learning just come from listening to people. And I'm grateful for that. I'm still doing that.
Yeah. So this takes us to what would you like to see other managers do better? This can be managers that work for you, managers that you've seen, just managers in general. Like, what are the things you see managers do that just, either gives you the bad vibes or, makes you go crazy?
Well, I can tell you what's a thorn in my side, and it's been a thorn in my side for years now. Are managers that are unable to separate their personal from professional, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if managers really understand the burden that puts on your team when your behaviors are so inconsistent, because it's kind of looped into whatever is going on in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to know what's going on in your life. That's not something they need to track. They are there to work and to produce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to worry about, are you having a good day? Are you having a bad day? Are the kids okay? Is your mom okay? Is your boyfriend okay? Right? That shouldn't be something that your team has to keep track of and worry about. And over the course of my career, I told you a story of one leader that, I worked with, that she made it a point, and she was an administrator, and she made it a point to come to work and tell staff about this boyfriend she was so proud to have. And she would call staff into her office just to hear these stories about her boyfriend and how attractive he was, and pulled up pictures and talked about their vacations. And the staff, I mean, there's a power dynamic that you have to always consider too, because these are people that report to you, or they report to people that report to you. So they don't have the confidence, the comfort, which is understandable, to just say, I don't want to hear this.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about you and your boyfriend. But they're feeling like their jobs may be threatened if they say that. So I have to sit here for 2 hours and listen to you talk about you and this boyfriend. And right? And it happens in different variations.
Right.
I've seen it happen over the years, and I'm grateful because, my sister, one of my sisters, when I got my first job at that hospital in South Florida, I remember being excited because I'm like, this is my first job. I get benefits. I'm official. Oh my gosh. I was so excited. And she said, great. I'm happy for you. She may not even remember this, but she said, I'm happy for you. But just remember, work is work. Personal is personal. And she said, you don't ever want to be one of those staff members that when you're calling your manager's phone, that they have to take a deep breath before answering, right? You don't want to be one of those staff. And
Right.
those words always stuck with me. And I took that into the leadership aspect too, also because I know what it's like to be burdened with the feelings and experiences of somebody I report to. And luckily for me, I've had the personality where I've managed to kind of circumnavigate that. But others don't. Others really, they're not supported in a way where they're able to do that, or they don't know how to do that. And again, they shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to place that boundary. So that's been one of the common areas of concern for me, is being unable to separate that. And that happens in other aspects too. I've seen that happen with clinicians. I've seen that happen with physicians. They'll come in and they want to cancel every patient off their schedule. This patient isn't appropriate. That patient is going to take too long. That patient needs to see this other doctor. And it turns out that none of that was true, of course. But because they're going through personal situations at home in which they don't feel as if they had control at home, they come to work and then they create all this havoc because of what they're going through at home. So I would say to all the leaders and managers out there that maybe do a self-assessment, right? How much are you bringing to work? Are your staff feeling it? Are you having staff come to you and say, oh yeah, I was dealing with this thing, and you ask them, well, why didn't you talk to me? Well, you just seemed like you were overwhelmed, or you just seemed like you were really busy, or you just seemed like you have a lot going on. And those are things that, for me as a leader, are triggering, because I don't ever want a team member to worry about anything I have going on. I'm here for you.
Yep.
So That's one of
Exactly.
the concerns I have.
I love that. That's fantastic. That's again, that's one of those things that as a manager
Yeah.
that you're on the way to work and you got to set your stuff aside so you can take care of your team, and
Yeah.
sometimes it leaks out and sometimes it just explodes, and it's
And
not
it's hard.
it's not good for you or the team.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard
Yeah.
to just leave things at the door, right? It's
Yeah.
because people are going through some significant things. People are dealing with managers are dealing with mental illnesses. Their managers dealing with, learning disabilities. Their managers
Mhm.
dealing with unsafe situations at home, and they have to come to work and deal with the pressures there, and also lead a team of humans, right? They have to
Mhm.
manage humans, and they're trying to manage themselves and possibly the other humans living in their home.
That's
So
right.
I understand the burden of it, and that it's easier said than done to just separate it all. Um, but when I think about what is the lesser of two evils, right? And what has the most lasting effect? Because let's say your situation, whatever it is, gets cleared up, it gets rectified, things are great, you're now skipping through the flowers, you're happy now. You have a team of people that are now traumatized and they don't know what's going on.
Right.
And it's hard to do that, what I call that cleanup work, right? To have
Mhm.
to address, yeah, I flipped out on you the other day, but it really wasn't about you, it was about me. And then you have to do this whole explanation. And again, it's just not fair to the team
Mhm.
that support the shared mission, whatever that mission is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if people realized how hard it is to rebuild that trust and sense of
Absolutely.
safety, they'd be way more careful about that blowing up at
Absolutely.
somebody or
Absolutely. And your team watches everything. They
Oh yeah.
they watch everything.
Yeah,
They
that's for
want to
sure.
see how you handle good news, bad news, annoying people, They want to they want to see everything. So,
Yeah.
we do have to be mindful of that, including myself.
Yeah. I used to have one of he was an employee and became a friend, and I ended up hiring him at two different companies, and he replaced me as the manager in the team when I moved to a different position. And I would always tell him, like, you can't get mad out on the floor with where the cubicles are. It's like, if you get upset, come in my office, close the door, you
Yep.
can rant and rave
Yep.
until you feel fine, and then you can go open the door and go back out, but don't ever do
Absolutely.
it on the floor.
Nope.
And that I've extended that to any of the managers or supervisors or leads that I've worked for me,
Yeah.
is come in my office, close the door, you can say whatever you want, I'm not going to hold
Yeah.
it against you.
Yeah.
It's
You want to
my
throw
job
up
to take care of
profanity.
you.
You want to, say whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say it to me or in front of me, but not in front of the
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
Now, in the
Exactly.
meantime, I am going to be making sure that you are actually okay after
Yeah.
you're done ranting. Like, do you actually feel okay? Like, do you need
Yeah.
a mental health day? Do you need to go take a walk? But
Mhm.
absolutely. I think that's great advice and something that managers should practice.
Yeah.
Definitely. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. It's really just being mindful of those things before you
Yeah.
release the valve on all over your team.
Yeah. And, if you have a strong personality like I do, it's hard to kind of, what do you call it, unwind that clock. Like, it's hard to
Yeah.
kind of roll that back and just be like, disregard everything I just said.
Yep.
It's hard to clean that up. So
Yeah.
as much as possible, yeah.
Yeah.
Find a proper space to do it, or wait until you leave work. As soon as you get in the
Right.
car, you can let loose.
Yeah. That was the good positive thing of, like, the commute. You used to have a half an hour to an hour in your car by yourself, so you could, like, let it go before you either got to work and saw your team, or got home and unleashed your work
Right.
fury all over your family.
Right, because it works the other way around too, right? Where you can't take out work frustrations on your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true.
So let's move on to hiring. So tell me about a time that you made a great hire What did it feel like when you interviewed the person? Is there a question you really like to ask to figure out if you've got the right fit for a position? Um, you can share a very specific example or more general, depending on who it might be.
I can think of, off the top of my head, 3 great hires, right?
Mm-hmm.
So within my leadership career, when I've gotten different managers and supervisors reporting to me, for the most part, it's always people I've inherited, right? So I've moved into a department, you already have this team, you already have this culture, good or bad, that's already built in. So you kind of inherit that, right? But in terms of people that I've gotten to hire and be a part of that process, those moments are always so special to me because the types of questions that I ask are very much based on those soft skills, as they call it, right? Because learning how to use, an electronic medical record, learning how to navigate the internal processes of a hospital or a community health center is one thing. But when you're faced with these dilemmas, you're faced with situations with a team member, um, whether it's a leadership position or not, I'm always interested in hearing how candidates would handle it because it speaks to the culture sometimes of where they come from, meaning the organization. Um, and it's one of those things where I like to put in scenarios of what if, right? So recently I just hired a manager. She was promoted from a supervisor role to a manager role. But this position, I had 69 applicants. And as I got down to the final 10, I started to put through these scenarios where one of the scenarios had to do with DEI efforts and inclusiveness. And, I know it's a political thing out there, but it's very real when you're in a leadership position to have that at the forefront of everything that you do. And one of the questions was, what if a team member came to you and reported to you that someone, right, said to them that their accent is hard to understand and they need to sound more American? That exact scenario. And what I'm looking for with that is, of course, being there to support the team member, right? As dealing with that, you have the HR piece, you have dealing with whoever that team member is and their supervisor. But what I really wanted to hear is the accountability, but also the understanding of what was the context around that. That's never a good thing to say. But is this person coming from an environment where it's okay to say things like that? Right? Is this person also someone with an accent that has also faced the same situation and they felt as if, well, I did the work, so you need to do the work too. Your English isn't good enough. You need to sound more American so we can suit these American people that we here to serve, which is, again, another inaccuracy. Lots of inaccuracies there.
Right.
Lots of inaccuracies. But that was one of the scenario type. That's an example of a scenario type questions I like to ask leaders because those are the things that pops up out of left field that it's not in a book in terms of how to handle properly. Or there may be different ways of handling it depending on the team member that's affected and the team member that said it and their level of accountability and understanding and willingness to move differently moving forward. So the hires that I've had that have been extremely successful, I can think of one back in my community health center days. It was within our maternity space. We have a maternity coordinator position where this was a new position for our organization. And it was extremely important to hire someone that had the experience with working with maternity, of course, patients, women that were currently pregnant, about to give birth. But with the community health center world, there was always this emphasis on once they have the baby, we have to make sure that them and the baby come back, right? So that because this is their medical home. So we have to enroll the baby or babies and make sure mom comes back for follow-up, whether it be just for PCP or it may be for mental and behavioral health services because she may be going through postpartum depression. So it was important to have someone in a role that this is where our leadership qualities come in, not as it relates to managing people, but managing program that it was critical to our organization. And I found someone that, she had nursing experience. She worked with, maternity patients. She came from a maternity service, OBGYN office, and, she came with a lot of trauma too. Speaking of, you mentioned employees that people didn't talk to them, their leaders didn't talk to them unless they were in trouble. And with her, she was a clear hire. She was the best fit. And I remember the first time I called her to my office and I was like, hey, you mind stopping by my office when you have a child? She came in shaking. And I'm like, what is happening? And she's like, well, am I about to be fired? Like, I know I just started, but, I can do better. And I said, well, no, I was just asking your opinion on this idea that I had, but no, your performance is fine. And she's like, well, every time I got called to the office before, it was to be written up, right? Yeah. Or there was some issue with my work. And, so that was kind of one of her, fears. And it took time to get her out of that mindset. And also for me to be more aware of how I approach her as well moving forward. And I say she's one of my best hires because I watched her grow and flourish. And when I say she took control of that program and she rocked it and she's still rocking it, and she's managed to grow and she's gotten her education and she's gotten her BSN and she's working on her master's, and to see her confidence just build. I mean, every time I think about her and I look at her, I'm very proud of that hire for sure. There have been others. There's been a manager that, I hired him directly he came from an optometry office, and, I had an opening for a site manager position, and, he came in with lots of determination and his own level of experience. And, when he started the job, he struggled. He struggled a lot. He got to a point where the team, they were just like, oh, it's not going to work with him. It's not going to happen. And it took for me to sit down with him. Of course, the typical coaching, but there were things that he was dealing with as well, right? Things around his own various personal challenges that he had to overcome. And it just so happens he was in the midst of a transition when his performance was just slipping during that time. But once he got that together, I mean, he flourished and became one of my best managers as well. And he's still flourishing. He's working at a different practice now, and he's doing extremely well. And I'm so proud to even see that. So I guess for me, it's the growth, right? And seeing where these people, knowing where they were and where they are now. And what gives me the most pride too is when they get into these new environments and the challenges just come, and hit them left and right. They're like, but yeah, I dealt with it. It was no problem. And yeah, it was, I dealt with that. I was cool. Like it was how nonchalant they are now compared to back in the day. They were having full-blown panic attacks, right?
Yeah.
I love to see the growth. And it confirms for me that they were the best fit for the position, not because they came with just the right job experience or the educational experience, but they were able to tackle these challenges, own it, right? And figure out a way to still be productive in their own ways. And their teams grew to respect them. And it was, so I think of those two individuals, and even the current CEO of my last organization, of the Community Health Center, she came in as a gynecologist. And I interviewed her as well. And it wasn't a leadership position at the time. But she went from gynecologist to associate medical director to chief medical officer to now she's the CEO.
Wow.
And administration and leadership was always something that she wanted to do. But she herself has shown so much growth, and to know I was a part of that process, it's very touching to this day. And she's a friend of mine now, who I love dearly.
That's great.
So.
Yeah, that's always nice when you get to see that growth. And,
oh my gosh!
And see people flourish. I mean, it's as a childless man, it's the only kind of parental feelings I have is like when you see people that you hired and trained and mentored, and then you see them like do so well in whatever they
Absolutely.
chose to do.
Yeah.
It just, it makes you feel pride and,
Yeah.
you know,
As a child woman, I can relate to that.
yeah,
Right? That's the growth
yeah,
that I get to see as well. And yeah,
yeah,
it's a great sense of pride seeing that and still seeing that. I'm still in touch with those people to this day, and they're doing great.
yeah. Yeah, it's the great thing about like LinkedIn and social
Oh,
media. This might be
yeah.
the only place that I like that kind of connection where you
Yeah.
get to like follow those
'Cause
people
I'm
around.
watching
But
from afar, like, oh my gosh,
yeah.
you know. So
So on the flip side, tell me about a time you had to help someone move to a new opportunity.
to a more fitting opportunity for them, or to a better
I
opportunity.
that is always up. That's in the eye of the beholder. We've had people talk about helping someone get a promotion. We've had people go through lots of layoffs.
Yeah.
Taking people from supervisory roles back to individual contributors
Yeah.
because it just wasn't the right fit. So
Yeah.
I think that's the good thing about this. I mean, in all
Yes.
honesty, when I wrote this question originally, it was, kind of thinking about like having to terminate somebody for poor performance. But I think the goodness in my guest has come out, and they've talked about so many other things that were way
Yeah.
more positive. So I'll
Well,
let you take it whichever way you like. But
I'll take it in all the directions. I can say for the
okay,
termination, right?
yeah,
One of the things that I work with my managers and other leaders about is there's always this sense of anxiety around termination because it's not a positive experience. Of course, nobody's happy and skipping into a termination, whether you think you're about to be terminated or you are terminating someone. But I suppose what I always remind my team of, and what I've reminded myself of, is that people are often not surprised by the time it gets to termination. If you've done your job of coaching and leading and disciplinary actions and performance improvement plans, by the time it gets to termination, I have an experience where someone has sit there and they're shocked and, oh my gosh, how could this be? The terminations I've experienced is like, yeah, you guys tried. Like, y'all hung in there for as long as you could. And I know, I'm just not going to get it together. It's always very, I guess for lack of a better word, amicable in a sense.
yeah,
I've never had anybody turning over tables and carrying on. And it's always handled respectfully too, which I think is key. Sometimes with HR being present, that can be helpful and sometimes very hurtful because, you should do an episode with just HR leaders because that's a whole other, that's a special form of leadership that should be talked about more. But yes, but you have HR leaders that some do require some training as it relates to dealing with people and people leaders. And there's an assumption that they have that strength there because they're HR. But that's a wrong assumption. But anyway, in terms of termination, though, if you have the right team and you have the right HR person present, and it's done in a way that it's still done with dignity and respect, I can't say I've had any negative experiences with terminations, but I think it's just important to highlight that point. People often know where they stand, at least if you're a leader that communicates and is transparent. Now, when it's a surprise, that's a different story. But in terms of having team members that have been promoted, I've experienced a lot of that too. And that's something that I highly encourage. From the operational side, it of course sucks because then you have an open position you have to go back and fill. And if you have a freeze going on, you can't fill it. So you just have to suffer until you can rehire. But, that's the side that, again, as a leader, you don't talk about to your team members, right? On the forefront, you're very happy for them. You're saying, yes, please pursue this opportunity. Because I have seen leaders that have blocked their team from being promoted, from being considered, for various reasons. They're either that wonderful and they don't want to lose them, or also they could also just be that terrible and it's retaliation, right? You don't deserve this opportunity because you suck working for me and you don't deserve this promotion. So I'm going to make sure I mess up your reference check, right? So I've heard and seen all the different variations of that. But I guess going back to that sense of pride that I always feel, seeing people grow and flourish, that's never been me. So when someone wants to pursue an opportunity, I mean, if it's attainable and they understand the rules and the roles and responsibilities, I would always support that. And I have done that. So I've seen my team members move from a coordinator position to an assistant manager position, assistant manager position to a manager position. I've seen the different steps to that. And I've supported it and I've always encouraged it. And in situations where I felt like they weren't quite ready, I would be transparent about that too. Still saying, if you want me to support you, I will, but just know this is what's going to be expected. And these are the areas of opportunity. So you may want to work on these areas of opportunity first before pursuing that if you want to be successful. Because again, you never know what kind of leader you're going to get. So you have to be able to rely on yourself to motivate yourself, right? And to find that validation within yourself, just in case you don't get a leader that will pat you on your back every day and tell you did a great job today. You should be able to tell yourself that, right? That commute home we were talking about, being like, damn, I did it today, you know?
That's right.
I used to have a manager on my team that would say, Kimmy, I worked for all my coins today. And I was like, well, great. It's like, does that mean you didn't work for your coins the other days? And she's like, well, no, I worked for my coins those other days, but I really worked for my coins today. And I said, all right. So, and she's one of those people that went on to a higher position at a different facility, and she's flourishing right now. So, I guess I've experienced all the variations.
Yeah, and I think any manager who's been around for a little while gets to experience all those things. And there's layoffs and reduction in forces and that kind of stuff that it can be a surprise, or is a lot of terminations at the same time. And it's like they say you get paid to do that kind of stuff, and you do everything else for free. So like this is the responsibility of being a manager is there, and it's sometimes it's painful.
And it can be a thankless thing too, right? And being okay with that. Be okay with that.
That's right. So, what is something that you learned from the best manager you ever worked for?
From the best manager I worked for, I learned the importance, back to that active listening. Because I think about the best manager I've had a few great ones, right? And what they all had in common was their ability to just sit and just listen to me. And, I was always that team member that I didn't require you to check in on me often. Like, if I needed something, I'll reach out to my manager. I'm still that way now. She'll say to me, Kimmy, I feel like I don't spend enough time with you. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, you don't have to spend any more time with me, but be available when I need you, right? So that's just been one of those things where it's being able to actively listen, being there as a support, and also customizing my approach to the team member I'm dealing with, because it's not a one size fits all. And people are wired so differently that if I had to make that decision, if I really wanted success as a leader, I had to learn different ways of interacting with my team in order to be more productive and in order for them to be more productive. And also letting go of that theory of, well, this is what I would want, so therefore I'm going to treat my team the way I would want to be treated, which again is it can be also problematic because I just mentioned I'm the type of person I don't need the constant check-in, but there are other team members that like that.
Yeah.
So this is where those rounds come in. This is where I pulled from that executive leader at that first hospital, and I saw her come through every week and talk to the staff. That's where things like that comes in, and it doesn't take long to do that. And that's when people get to come and talk to you, like, oh, they stop you in the hallway and say, do you know this trash can over here is falling apart? It's been that way for 6 months. Like, I'm like, 6 months? Like, what? Well, why didn't you talk to your manager? Oh, they always seem busy, and I would always forget. And it was just, always something like that. But you find out the darndest things doing rounds. But yeah, what I've learned from some of the amazing leaders I've had is it's dedicating time to your team in various ways. And, there's some leaders that'll say, I don't spend time with my team outside of work. I don't interact with them unless it has to do with work. And I understand having that boundary because I do think, back to what I said earlier, there are some issues with boundaries sometimes with managers. But I think once in a while, popping up at a happy hour, saying hello, right? Spending time with your team, chatting with your team, it helps for them to relate to you better as well. And not just, again, see you as this leader that, I can't really access or talk to or may not be able to understand me. It's a lot of those barriers or walls can be broken down with just some time and proper communication. Yeah. So some of the best managers have done that. One of the things that my last leader did that I found to be amazing is operating in a sense of solidarity with your team. So, for example, when it comes to remote work, she was an older woman. She was 69 years old. She lived an hour and 10 minutes away from the site. And, when COVID hit and all that, I worked in tandem with her. So I was the deputy director. And, I said to her, listen, and this was during the time where autoimmune compromised people were at risk and then older folks were at risk. And I said to her, listen, you may want to work from home. And I'm happy to stay here so that you can be more safe. And she was like, absolutely not. She's like, if my frontline staff are here every day and these patients are coming in every day, then I'm going to be here every day. Like she was not going to sit at home while the rest of us were on site working. And she said the frontline team, they don't have the option of working remotely. And it's a privilege for us to be able to do that as leaders. And she was always conscious of what would that look like if I'm not on site with them. And she's like, and quite frankly, I feel safer at work where we have all these safety protocols than being at home with my cat and my husband driving me crazy. So.
Yeah, that is true.
And those are some of the things I've learned. So operating in solidarity for with teams is what also helped to build relationships that have been long-standing and fruitful.
Yeah. Standing shoulder to shoulder with your employees can go a long way.
Absolutely. And you can. Wearing a suit, you can still do it.
Who wears a suit anymore?
Or just put out some scrubs or, whatever. But just be there. Be visible.
Right. So I have two kind of rapid fire questions that you can describe in as short of terms as you want. So,
okay.
How would you describe your leadership style? Do you have a name for it, or something that you've learned over the years?
I guess I'll throw together the official term. So you have the democratic leader, right? That always, right, considers the input of staff. And then what do you call the autocratic leader, the authoritative, this is what it is. You're constantly putting out orders. And then, you have what they call the servant leader too, right? And I feel like I'm a mash of all three. I don't think I fit into any particular style. I think my style changes based on who I'm dealing with.
Okay.
and what team I'm leading and what organization I'm a part of. It
Right.
all ties into how I decide to operate. But if I had to choose one, I'm definitely I'm definitely a servant leader in the sense of if my team is good, then I'm good, right? I always say I'm nothing without my team. And if I have a team of managers and supervisors that are constantly unhappy or constantly stressed out or constantly getting sick or constantly just anxious, it 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 behooves me to make sure that I either connect them with the resources to feel whole again or to do what I can on site to make sure that they feel supported. And it looks very different for each individual.
Right.
So one type of style, while it may be at my core, depending on who it is, I may have to, jump back and forth. So I know it was a rapid fire question, but it was the shortest
That's okay.
shortest response I can give you.
Yeah. Unless you have a book that you subscribe to is like your leadership style, sometimes it's a little bit of everything. So then the next one is, if you had a Post-it note stuck to your monitor that was supposed to remind you of something that you needed to do every day, what would that Post-it note say?
Eat lunch. Sometimes I just get caught up. And it's not that I don't have time allotted. Like I'm not saying that I'm in these back-to-back meetings and I just don't have time. And it's none of that. It's just sometimes I get caught up in the work and I get caught up with my team and I'm like, oh yeah, it's 3:00 and I haven't eaten lunch yet. And that happened a lot, up until recently. I'm stepping out the door at 3:20 saying, yeah, I'm going to go eat lunch. And the staff are looking at me like, this is a late lunch. Like, this is supper time. So, I'm to establish a proper routine in the sense where, because I'm a role model even in that sense too, where they're watching to see even when I go eat lunch. Like it happened at my last center and people sitting at the front desk, I would walk by that day and they'd be like, Kimika, you didn't leave today to go to lunch. The managers, they have cameras, they can see. And it's like, well, damn, since y'all are watching me, I need to make sure.
Yeah.
But I just get caught up with things. But honestly, that's what the Post-it would say. And that has nothing to do with management or leadership, really. But that's what it would say. Eat lunch.
But I think that is something that I think a lot of managers, like as specific as go eat lunch is, like there is it's a take care of yourself reminder.
Yeah.
And it's for even like the best reasons that we do things for our teams or at work or whatever. Sometimes we're actually doing more damage than we realize. And one of the managers that used to work for me, she'd go on vacation and she would be online. She'd be on Teams. She'd be checking in. She'd be reading emails. She'd be responding to stuff.
Yeah.
And she came back from like the first vacation she had after I took over as the director.
Yeah.
And I was like, you can't do this. Like everybody sees you doing it. And then when they're on vacation, they think you're expecting them to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, you have to be the employee you want your employees to be.
Absolutely. Be the change you wish to see.
Exactly.
And I've been an offender with that too. Used to be. Mm-hmm.
All right. When I come into the office next time, I want to see that posted on the monitor. and I'll take you to lunch.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. But you're always taking care of me. You're so great, Chad. We all love you.
And then our last question, is there something you wish I had asked you or something that you wish everybody listening to this podcast knew?
I think something that's always at the forefront of my mind is, as a manager or a leader, being aware of how you show up in a space, right? Because a lot of that has to do with identity. And some identities create a lot of privilege, and some identities create a lot of, communication issues, microaggressions, all that. And you know, it's one of those things where for other managers and leaders out there, keeping your identity in mind as you push through the world. Because for me, as a Black woman, a Jamaican woman, there are behaviors and habits that I have that, people have interpreted in the past as, the aggressive thing, that angry Black woman thing, which is a horrible, horrible assumption to me about any individual of any cultural background. So part of being more relatable and accessible to your team is also teaching them that there are different cultures and, feelings and emotions and experiences that exist. And even if you as a leader or a manager shows up differently or communicates differently, it doesn't mean it's a negative thing because it's different. And I say that to people out there as it relates to their managers too, right? So approaching your team with an open mind and teams approaching their leader with an open mind, if their leader happens to be, a woman or somebody that's younger than you or a different race than you. There are all these things to keep in mind and having a mutual respect for that individual, not just their identity and just how they show up. The same you would expect. So, and that could be a whole other session just talking about a leader of color, being a leader of color. That's a whole other.
I have lots of questions about those things. Being I used to say middle-aged white man, but I don't know if I can be middle-aged anymore unless I'm going to be like 100, unless I'm going to live to be 100. So, but like how I have questions, and we probably will do this as a separate session some other time. But how is it that I, as a white man, can be better at leading people who are different than me, and then how is that experience different for you, being a Black woman leading other people, white men, white women, men of color, anybody, gay, straight, trans. I mean, there's
all of
it's so, it's that the experiences are so different, and what people need in the workplace can be very different, and it's that's one of my lifelong journeys, is to figure that out so that I can be the best manager for everybody on the team. And sometimes it's hard to ask those questions, but especially when you meet people who volunteer to tell you, it's great to take advantage of it. So
well, if you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to.
Luckily, I know where you are.
Exactly.
We'll set that up in the calendar.
Definitely. I'm open to talking about that for sure.
Awesome. Well, Kimika Green, thank you so much for your time and all of the great stories. And thank you for being here. And we'll talk again soon. That's the whole purpose. I want to have fun.
Yeah, this is nice. My first podcast. Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.